So I guess we can, like, when we upload the VOD, we can just cut all this nonsense out of it. I mean, they don't need to.
Yeah.
They don't need
Yeah,
to hear the troubleshooting.
that's actually
Um,
something I forgot last time as well because there's like 10-15 minutes in the beginning that's just silent that I forgot to cut out. So
all
the VOD on YouTube is just yeah, uncut. But I'll do it this
right.
time.
So okay, so cats. Um, and we are talking about how you don't have a cat. You have been unable to have a cat because of your sort of living situation, but you used to have
Yeah.
cats. And I guess the last bit is like, do you wish to have cats yet again? Is that part of your future plans?
Um, I I would like to have animals, definitely. I
So not necessarily cats. Could be a dog or a guinea pig.
Yeah, or a snake or a bird. I don't mind.
A
Like
snake.
yeah, or a snake and a bird, but then the birds might have problems with that.
What are you gonna do with a snake though? I mean, that's like
I
I don't really get that. I know people who have snakes, but it's I've never really, as much as I love animals, I've never really gotten like the pet snake kind of thing. Like, what does one? How do you socialize with your pet snake?
Apparently they like recognize people or animals as well.
Yeah, but can
So
you like play with the snake? Can you cuddle with it? Can you, you know?
I I assume with some of them, not all of them. But I guess for me it would be more about just overcoming a fear of, and then because snakes are like portrayed really badly, and they're always the bad guys. But that because and I also have fears against snakes. So, but I always try to face my fears, and having a snake would or taking care of a snake would probably be actually a good thing.
I
Like
mean,
cats would be the like comfortable option.
I mean that's the kind of cool thing about you actually that you seem so determined to face your fears. Um, it's quite a brave thing to do. I think a lot of people spend a lot of their lives avoiding the things that make them afraid. Um, and for me, certainly, like, look, I like to face my fears too, but I think when it comes to snakes, I might make an exception and just,
Just
stick to
keep them
the.
where they are.
I mean, my plan, as soon as I'm gonna be moving into a new place probably quite soon, as soon as I start my new job, and I'm planning to get two cats because if you get two cats from the same litter, then they kind of like love each other and
Yeah,
it's just amazing. They support each other and they're just best friends.
yeah.
And then my long term plan is to have two cats and two dogs. But then I need a big house. That's
When you make a family one day,
well,
when
that
you
will be the family. That will. I don't need other humans. You know what?
no,
I'll get the two cats and the two dogs, and then we'll decide together, the five of us, if we want to bring other humans in or not.
you're gonna be testing all humans if any of your dogs growl or if your cats like don't uh purr at
Yeah,
the
for sure.
humans.
I mean,
Okay.
I think that's very important. That's um, but yeah, I always told people I was a dog person for like all of my life, and then in the last few years, I've just woken up to cats. Like I thought cats were just like these, the stereotype. They're independent. They don't care about humans. They do their own thing. And I never really realized that actually you can have a relationship with a cat. And then some of my closer friends got a cat, and all of a sudden, like it was like an absolute kind of opened up my mind about them because I just like in the space of 3 years, I've gotten close to so many different cats, and now I'm so fond of like all of my friends' cats, and I have to have cats, and it's not just dogs that can love you. Cats love you
Yeah.
too.
I actually for this year in July for like 3 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks, I was taking care of a cat. Like um she was living in my apartment, and the first few days she was like really shy, but at the end, like it's always sad to give the cat back. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know that experience. I've done cat sitting quite a bit. In fact, I'm supposed to do it again quite soon.
Yeah.
When my friends go away, they always ask me to look after their cats.
But do you
Um,
do you ever have them over at your place, or do you go and just see them?
no, I usually kind of just house it and then keep the
Mm.
cat where it's in its normal environment, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
I
there's
mean
some
that's the
weird
better
cats
one.
out there as well. You know, I went to Johannesburg to visit my brothers last month, and I stayed with a friend of mine there for a while, and she has these two cats, and the one of the two cats would wake me up every morning licking my armpit. And I was like, this cat's into like weird shit. That's because that's not like that's not a normal cat thing. But I think that cat was sort of like deviant in some ways. Um,
I the cat that I was cat sitting actually um actually didn't really want to sleep with us or in my bed, but she actually and then started like getting really close. Uh, like I don't even want to talk about this experience. It's so sad giving a cat back.
okay. Let's talk about Rasta changes then.
Okay,
Um,
that's actually a topic uh I don't know too much. I just know that there haven't been too many big changes.
yeah, I mean it's look, I think as a starting point before talking about specific changes, I have some sort of ideas to discuss about the how it works in general.
Yeah.
Um, I think that something I brought up in Discord recently. A lot of people actually disagreed with me, but I'm interested to hear what your take is. I think that one of the main issues that kind of plagues Dota as an esport is that we're not yet at the level of development where teams are bigger than just the starting lineup. And so the way that in League of Legends or in most sports, you have kind of like your starting lineup, and then you've got the substitutes or the bench or whatever. In Dota, you've got 5 players and that's it. And so the immediate consequence of that is if you want to add a new player to your team, you have to remove another one. And for me, that creates a situation where things feel very unstable because you can't, like, it's normal for a team, even if they're doing well, to want to invest in a better player. Like, you always want to try and think of ways to make your team better. But in Dota, it's like constantly this zero sum thing where if you want to get someone else, you have to remove someone you have. You can't, like, get someone else and then try them both out or alternate between them. And I sort of hope that in the future, um, we're going to have a system where teams can have bigger teams. And obviously, that requires the rules changing in certain ways. Like, for example, no one's going to want to just be on a bench. The current rules say that you can only play in emergency situations. They'd have to have rules that let players sort of switch in and out of a team during a tournament for different matches or something like that. Um, but yeah, I think that part of what makes roster shuffles feel so extreme and so destabilizing in Dota is just that there's this real zero sumness to it. As soon as one change has to happen, it's a big change, and then that leads to another big change, leads to another big change. There's no cushioning to it.
Um, I think this has been a topic in the past as well and discussed, and I think it's very similar to CS:GO. I think I'm not quite sure. Uh, that it's never possible to train with any substitutes and be still on the level as other higher teams because the people who are on the bench wouldn't get as much experience or get to play together as much as the core team. Uh, so I guess that's where it comes from that the team is that small and that everything needs to click that well to play on the high level.
I mean, I think the only real I guess I don't really buy that someone wouldn't want to be in a team because they don't play every single game. I'd buy that someone doesn't want to be in a team because they don't play ever. But if they're playing quite a lot, just not all the games, like that seems That seems reasonable to me. In fact, that's like the job of every professional player in a sports team. League of Legends also, I don't know the scene that well, but I know that most of the League of Legends teams are sort of 7 to 8 people. And it's just like Dota, it's only 5 playing per game. And I think that some of them at least do use the players interchangeably. Um, so for me, it's like there's a barrier, which is money, which is that teams can't afford to pay 8 people rather than 5 in Dota. Because usually the salaries are quite low and it's mostly based on prize money. And if the prize split goes that much more, it's a lot less money. Um, and then I think also the barriers that the status quo with the rules that we have, you wouldn't be able to play. You would just be sitting on the bench. But if they changed the rules that said that like you could mix and match as you please, that'd be a different thing. Obviously, for that to work, one of the other changes you need is you need coaches. You need coaches that have real authority over teams. Because if you're 8 players and you're just deciding amongst yourself who plays which game, it's going to be a disaster. You'd have to have like a sort of coach who's in a position of authority, and that's not the case in Dota at all. Like for the most part, coaches are kind of helpers. They're not really bosses.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Uh,
I mean, look, for me, this is all context. It's just like important context to why I think our shuffles look the way that they do.
I think actually Anna went through something like this, being just constantly on the bench and maybe playing like 1 or 2 games, and like I can't remember the reason why he was benched. Probably because his Chinese wasn't good enough or something. Uh, but that didn't end up working out. Like, I'm not going to blame the Chinese scene, but maybe it was that. Like, I think they have like players on the bench, or like, because they take also players from academy teams, so that's somewhat their bench. But I think academy teams don't work anymore because of the roster limitation.
Yeah.
But to talk about uh, teams not being able to afford it, I think the tier 1 teams can definitely afford it. To have like this one extra person, but right now it's usually like the analyst coach or the ex-pro player that's basically a substitute, like with Seb.
Yeah, I
And
mean, look, I gotta like for me, it's a matter of time. Like, I don't know if you agree, but for me, it's 10. If Dota's still around in 10 years, which I think it will be, every team's gonna have 5 players: a coach, a manager, a psychologist, an analyst, and a bunch of other players. That's what I think. Like, I think a Dota team is gonna be like, when you include the support staff and the players on the bench, it's gonna be closer to 15 people than 5. Um, it's gonna take a long time, but that is for me, that's sort of the natural direction of development that we're gonna go in.
I think I've definitely read in the past players talking about this, like being a substitute and not wanting to be a substitute because they don't get to be a part of the team as much as the core players. I think also some tier 2 players talked about it, but I can't remember who. That you you always want to be practicing with the same people, but I guess once we get past like the mental barriers of playing together with someone else, we might get there. But
Yeah, I mean, look, it's 4 years ago, you wouldn't find a professional Dota player who thought coaches were a good idea. Like, literally, as recently as
yeah,
4 years ago, go back to 2015. That was the year that it started. So let's say 2014, then 5 years ago. Every single Dota player, when interviewed, thought that coaches were a bad idea. And now it's like the most ubiquitous thing. Of course, you must have a coach. It would be
yeah,
ridiculous to not have a coach. And so for me, there's a paradigm shift. There's a like once people start to see the benefit of these things for their own eyes, suddenly they're very quickly to accept it. I don't think that Dota players are experts on sort of the theory behind how the ecosystem should work, how a team should work, or even a lot of the time Dota players aren't even experts on Dota. They're experts in the sense that they like have very good sense, very good feeling for the game. But like when it comes to the theoretical components, like I really don't think Dota players are like always the best to judge.
I I think another problem with this, with having substitutes or extra players, is the fact that the player pool is actually quite small. So you would have to start stealing players from other teams.
Yeah, sure, but that's a problem to the development that we talked about a bit last week, I think,
Yeah.
which also I think will change in time. There's been a comment asking about salaries. Um, that's sort of a difficult question to answer, especially because I haven't been involved directly in sort of coaching any teams or anything like that for at least a year now. But I would say that the lowest look, there's teams aspiring to be pro earn nothing, right? So like the current infamous team only got salaried right before TI, even though they managed to top 8 TI, they spend most of the time with zero salary. There's sort of the low entry level teams where the players get maybe $500 a month. Um, I'd say the average tier one slash tier two slash aspiring tier two team salaries for players are going to be in the region of like $2,000 a month. Especially if you're talking about a, sort of a poorer region like Southeast Asia or CIS. Um,
Do
and
you
then when it comes to like the big North American teams or like the top sort of TI winning teams like Liquid or OG or those kind of teams, the salaries go quite high actually. Like it's in the region of I think sort of 15,000 a month, which is still very very low compared to professional athletes, but pretty high compared to like an ordinary person. And so I think there's like a massive range, but for the vast majority of Dota players, almost all the money they get is from prizes, realistically. Yeah, well, what was your question?
do you think forward gaming should have stayed together as, or stayed afloat as an organization? Just tried to like do as best as they could at TI.
I mean, you know what? My thing about forward gaming is also about money. I don't understand why they're trying to base a team in New York. I mean, I do understand it. Like, people want to be on the East Coast because then they can scrum against Europeans. But at the same time, one of the main obstacles I think for the North American Dota scene is that it actually costs much more to maintain a team there, because you're usually the people paying the money are paying in US dollars regardless. But your US dollars go so much further if you're in, you know, Russia or the Philippines or Peru than if you're in the United States. And then you take that to the extreme when you base a team in freaking New York, which is like one of the most expensive places you could ever be in the United States. So yeah, they get the benefit of the scrims, but like to me, the fact that you end up making a loss, that you end up not getting a good return on your investment, that you know that's kind of what happened with Ford. They just couldn't sustain the investment anymore, and that doesn't surprise me at all because they were trying to have a team in bloody New York, which to me is just insane.
Do you think they were slightly mismanaged?
I mean, from the financial side, yeah, for sure, I think so. I mean, I have like a small amount of personal experience related to them, which is that there was a stage where I was talking to them about working for them as an analyst.
Yep.
And funnily enough, the reason it didn't ended up not happening is because they were, I mean, basically they were lowballing me. They were offering to pay like a really like ridiculously low amount of money for like full-time analyst role. And I sort of interpreted that as just like they're under financial pressure because everything's so expensive for them. Um, which sure, like, but my sympathy is limited when you're deciding that that's where you want to be. Maybe someone who knows more about North American geography would be able to think of like, is there a place on the East Coast of the United States that's sort of cheap to live? Because then it would still have good internet access to Europe, but you know, not cost as much money.
Aren't there really any NA teams? There's a couple, right? But I
I mean, there's
guess you play, if you play them that often, you're not going to learn anything.
yeah, you need a wider pool of like strong opponents to test against, I'd say. Are there any specific roster changes, like rumors or anything like that we about.
Yeah, I've
Um,
I've not kept track any of it. Do, like, do you know anything interesting?
um, I mean, what are the big ones people are talking about? So there's like a heavily rumored G roster where people say that Sumail and S4 are going to be out, and it's going to be Arteezy at one, um, Albert at two, Ramses at three, with Crit and Fly still at four and five. And I mean, that's sort of like an interesting rumor. It would be very surprising to me. I I sort of hope it's not true because for the longest time, one of the issues that EG struggled with was having too many greedy cores. That was sort of ostensibly why they got rid of Universe. And the metagame has shifted to a place now where teams sort of get away with having a lot of greed, having like lots of cores. In fact, some teams get away with having four cores. But metagames are sort of are volatile things. It can just as easily change back. And if you lock yourself in with a bunch of like heavy farm core players,
Yeah, I think
that's not going to end what like you can't sustain yourself for an entire season, I think.
I think that's a very big rumor because as far as I know, Ramses is also pretty much on par with Arteezy, so they would still have like the same setup as before.
Yeah, I mean, and Ramses they're saying would be the three. I mean, it's like I'm sure he can play the role. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure like at that level, most of the top players can play all the roles they want to. But it's about like sort of having the kind of sacrificial personality. And that's quite rare. I mean, I actually think it's one of the rarer things in Dota. The three position and the five position, the two roles that are sort of the most sacrificial, they require a personality of a player where like it's kind of like when you're playing a pub and you get a double kill early on in the game. Most people when they get that early double kill, immediately they're thinking maybe I can rush a Midas. Maybe I can. They're thinking of like that cool item they can get really fast to own stuff with. And that's whether they support, whether they offlane, whatever role. And you need to be that kind of player who's like actually able to think, wow, I got a double kill, I can buy so many wards, or like what does my team need? I got a double kill, I can get a mechanism. And the fact of the matter is like most players just don't think that way. And I think that's because most of the Dota that most people play is in pubs. And it's not really a pub mentality to think about your team. The pub mentality is much more to think of like, how do I win in spite of my team? Yeah, and Rhyme is saying that Ramsey's played offlane before. I know he played offlane before. I mean, and yeah, I mean, the more important point might be what you're saying after is that he's an aggressive player. That's definitely true. My concern is that I mean, this is something that I felt like we saw even in the grand finals of the last of TI9, is that yes, if you have three players who like to have lots of farm, if you're very aggressive and you're constantly ahead and have more space on the map, that can work. The problem is like if you have three cores that all like to play with farm and don't play well without farm, and you're behind in the game, you fall apart, right? And so like in the grand final, I felt like Liquid looked a lot better when they had Chen because they were drafting these lineups where there was like always a TA mid, a tight end to off lane, and a safe lane carry. These three cores that all want to play from ahead, all want to have lots of farm, and that what you could only enable that condition by like absolutely dominating early on with a Chen. Now, for me, it's just too risky to have this setup where I'm not saying it's impossible that you can succeed for some amount of time, but I think over a long period you'll be exposed. That's sort of how I feel about it.
Right. I wanted to say something to that, but I
So sorry, I went on for
you
really
went
long.
on a tangent. uh, right. Yeah. But what do you think about like communication? Because Ramses is also like super young, and I'm not sure how good his English is, and also Abed is from yet another country. Like
Yeah.
I think having m- mixed teams like this is very good. Having someone from each region, almost each region. But I think communication would definitely not be good. At least not in the beginning. We we've seen Resolution. I think he pretty much grew up and learned a lot of his English because of being on Team DC. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think that's something they can overcome. I think that a team of EG's stature, like when you have that really impressive organizational structure, you've got like a really competent COO, really competent management. The players are very experienced. They understand these things. They know that communication is really important. I think they'll be able to work on that and make it work. Like that wouldn't be what stood out as the issue there. And I think that Ramses is from Russia. Uh, Abed's from the Philippines. They both have like decently competent English speaking ability, in my opinion, from what I've seen. I don't know. If it was a Chinese player, that would be a big question mark. And I think that there's a reason why we've pretty much never seen a Chinese player playing outside of China, and I think a lot of that is to do with language. It's sort of the only region. China's the only region that gets away with having successful teams, despite pretty much always being Chinese players. And even there, we've seen that Chinese teams have succeeded when they brought in Malaysians and Singaporeans from time to time. Um, and so that kind of like mixing and crisscrossing is usually beneficial when you can do it. But yeah, I think the language barriers is in Dota. It's mostly just China and then everyone else, because pretty much everyone else is got like sort of competent English level for Dota.
I mean, we have the chat wheel now. We don't need anything else. Um,
Yeah,
I wanted to ask about what do you think about the Korean scene? Do you think it's gonna come back alive with T1?
I mean, I hope so. Like anyone who follows any esports has got to believe that for Korean infrastructure to be invested in your esport would be a good thing. Um, so like I hope it's a sign of more to come, but I feel like we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. We have to wait and see. Like, and in terms of like their ability as a team, people already overhyped when MVP kind of reformed as Immortal. Quite
Yeah,
disappointing.
because
Um,
currently, like the biggest Korean players are coaches or part of other teams, and I think it's actually mostly Canadian Koreans, so it's very specific because I don't actually know too many of the Koreans still who like started playing in Korea, because I think March and a bunch of others were just exchange students or something and then started playing. So there never was uh like a scene to begin with, like even back then, because also like Blitz's team won the Nexus Cup and stuff. So it's, I guess, a matter of how many players can we steal from League? Like what incentives do Korean players actually have to enter the scene?
yeah, I mean look, League seems to be super saturated in Korea, so it's I think it's very unlikely that Dota would ever upend that. But even if there were just one or two organizations in South Korea which committed resources towards Dota, that would probably be good for development. I mean, even though there aren't significant Korean Dota players right now, as you said, there's a lot of the top coaches are from South Korea, and we can't ignore the contribution that MVP made when they were big, when they were breaking out, sort of 2015, 2016, 2017. Like they did affect everyone's understanding of the game. They made a contribution, especially when it comes to sort of really fast-paced, kind of aggressive Dota, um, playing the map. Like the thing that I always remember is the aggressive Nature's Prophet. I feel
Yeah,
like that was something because before that, Nature's Prophet was very much considered to be, we had Admiral Bulldog's Nature's Prophet, which was about split pushing. Then we had the TI4 Nature's Prophet, which was about pushing and maybe some split pushing too. But I feel like MVP kind of made that hero into like a fighting hero. Um, to the extent that for a long time that's kind of how everyone thought about it, and that's how it ended up being picked as a support hero later on. And most recently, it's often been a support hero, just because the credit for me goes to MVP for showing that that's a hero that can that can fight early on.
Yeah, I'm like super sad to not have seen the Korean scene actually grow because they're just in a world of their own when it comes to esports.
Yeah,
Are
I
you
mean,
making food?
it's not me. Sorry, it's
Say hello to whoever that is.
yeah.
There's a lot of noise.
Well, hopefully it will go away. It's just in there.
Tell them to leave.
Unfortunately, I live in a very tiny flat.
Okay,
Um,
that's okay. But they seem to be very angry at whatever they're doing.
I think it's also have a sensitive mic. Um,
Okay,
yeah. But
alright.
anyway, was there any other? I mean, what's the other? Is there another good roster rumor that's worth discussing? Um, I'm not really sure. I guess one thing that I wanted to say, which is not a rumor that I've seen anyone else start, but I sort of think that it wouldn't surprise me that much if Liquid made a change.
Yeah?
Specifically, and this is a weird thing because they came second, and usually finalists like are the most likely teams to stick. I sort of felt watching TI that Liquid got second in spite of Weeha. I sort of, like they said they needed a change. They made a change. They brought this guy in. I don't think bringing him in is any significant part in why they succeeded. Like, I think what he brought to the team was pretty much Meepo. Um, it's hard. Like, I pretty much think that every other hero he played, Miracle could play better than him. I think that their most impressive performances, Miracle was actually playing mid again. And I honestly think that like, and this is like super overstepping because I really don't have internal insights into the team. But I would prefer to see a Liquid where Miracle mains mid and they bring in like a dedicated carry player. Um, that said, they did make the finals of TI. They did really well, and we has just joined the team. There's a lot of room to develop into that team, and he seemed to really be thriving and enjoying it at least. And so I certainly wouldn't criticize them if they kept him on and gave it a few more months to see where the team went. But if I were Liquid, I'd sort of at least be looking around and thinking, is there a better player?
What about Heen? I think he had
As
some
a
part.
player,
No, not as a player, but him leaving the team. Did he leave? He left, right?
yes, he left Liquid. I mean, again, ostensibly because what he said is that he felt like he wasn't doing enough for the team. He talked about how there was sort of the team was becoming stagnant, and he felt like he couldn't contribute enough anymore. Which it's hard to know if that's like a smokescreen, if he's just being really humble, because the players all seem to be happy with his contribution. And now Ian seems to have left TNC as well, right?
Yeah. I think it wasn't confirmed,
Yeah,
but
it's
it was rumored.
rumored.
Yeah.
And I'm not, that would be disappointing for me. TN's my favorite coach and TNC is my favorite team, and I sort of want them to be together for just that reason. But it would be understandable. I could certainly tell you that it's going to be a very big contrast culturally working with Team Liquid in Europe compared to working with TNC in the Philippines. And Ian's background is very, he's mostly lived in kind of very developed first world countries. A lot of my experience working in the Philippines and foreigners who've come there is that they don't do very well usually. I mean, even Singaporeans who are in Southeast Asia, but Singapore is just so much more of a wealthy, developed country than the Philippines. A lot of the time, people just aren't used to that standard of living and they just struggle. This is like totally speculative. There could be any number of reasons. And obviously, I actually hope that Peen stays with TNC. That would be the dream for me. I mean, Cuckoo made a joke about leaving, and
Yeah.
that was a joke. So, maybe the rumor about Heen is there's nothing to it either.
I actually want to come back to him being in Liquid. I I think it's rather the team's perception, I guess, of being stagnant because they got second at TI. And I think actually for them, also getting a psychologist to get through the mental problem of feeling of not improving could have given them the TI victory again.
They all got to do it. I mean, every team that doesn't have
Yeah.
a needs to get a psychologist. For me, it's like if you can't find a sports psychologist, then at least all your players should be speaking to a therapist or like have a group therapy session or like putting basically people need to be like consciously putting effort and time and money into their mental states. And there's like a basic mental health element of this, which is like most of the people involved in Dota have got serious mental health issues. I say
Yeah.
that. I mean, it's just like
Yes.
most of us kind of started like that, and it's an escape, and so like most people just individually, independent of whether they're competing team, could benefit from having serious attention towards their mental health. But also then at a competitive level, the mental aspect of the game is so decisive that like to not be investing resources into that, to me, it's like it's actually a year ago I thought that any team without a coach was just making a mistake. Simple. And I'm sort of getting to the point where I sort of feel that way now about the psychological aspect. If you're not addressing that, you're fucking up. Uh, the biggest case to discuss is Virtus Pro, which,
Yes.
like, by all reports, don't seem quite intent on not taking this stuff seriously at all. And in fact, maybe we even see another hint there from sort of the CIS community with was it Us Arts saying that the OG psychologist was just giving them performance enhancing drugs. Like to me, that reflects a kind of misunderstanding of what the psychologist does. That you couldn't understand what that person is doing, and so you just sort of automatically reduce it to terms that
Yeah.
make sense to you. Oh, she must have been giving them drugs,
Yeah.
as opposed to the simple explanation that she helped to help them to understand their feelings, help them to communicate with each other, help them to be more stable and have a better mindset about the game. Um, to me, everything I've seen from people who work for, play for, are involved with, and around Virtus Pro and the CIS community suggests that there's really no base level understanding of the importance of having psychologists to start with.
I think one of the problems also is just a matter of pride of not being able to be like vulnerable or being able to talk or like saying that this is an actual issue. I think
Yeah,
that's one
yeah,
of the big points.
yeah. There's pride, but then there's also just mental health stigma. When I was
Yeah.
working for, there was a player who like very definitely needed to see a therapist. And I spoke to the CEO and I was like, this guy needs to see a therapist. And instead he sent him to a psychiatrist and got him medicated. And it's like when you're in a space where people don't really understand psychology, that's what they do. They go straight to it must be about drugs, it must be about medication. Um, and so in a way, that's like one advantage I think for that probably the Western scene is going to have. Like I do think that at least based on my admittedly quite limited understanding of these things. Culturally, I think sort of the Western world, the sort of North America and Europe, when it comes to Dota, have the least stigmas attached to hiring a psychologist, um, and that could be an area in which those regions sort of pull ahead in the coming seasons in Dota if they're the ones taking it more seriously. Um, One of the listeners is asking if there's team secret rumors. Uh, the one that I've heard is about Sunil joining Secrets, but I don't really know what that's based on. It could just be
I
like a fan.
think there was a tweet, so that was probably not true. I'd imagine. But yeah, otherwise I've not heard anything about Secret. I mean they
Oh,
didn't do too badly.
they got their best TI finish ever. Like they
Yeah.
came fourth, which they've never done before. Um, but at the same time, it's Puppy's quite ruthless and quite authoritarian, and I sort of felt there were glimpses of it you could almost see on his face during the tournament, and I feel like Puppy's a guy who loses his patience with teammates quite easily I mean, not like one day to the next, but certainly over the course of a season. And so to me, Team Secret's a team that I'm never surprised if they make roster changes. Like the only roster change that would surprise me is if they remove Puppy, which that would surprise me because like he is the team, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think like it will always be him plus 4, pretty much, or
yeah,
him being the puppet master, literally, because that's where his nickname is actually from.
right.
Because
I mean,
he just wants to be in charge. He just wants to be the captain, the decision maker.
yeah, and you know what? He's really good at it, and he has so
Yeah.
much confidence, and that's a really big advantage. But the limitation then is that
But
it's almost
he's microing 4 people. That's the problem.
right. So it's almost bad to be an independent-minded person to work with Puppy. You know, like if you're an independent-minded player and you're going to be in the same team as him, you know there's going to be clashes because he's got like what works for him is sort of this military style top down. I'm the boss. Everyone follows me. Um, and so it's certain kinds of players that need to be in that kind of team. And unfortunately for him, I think some of the more innovative kind of breakthrough players usually are people who want to kind of think for themselves and lead themselves and be more independent. And I don't know how well that goes with him.
Do you think any of the current Team Secret players could be captains, other than Puppy, of course?
Um,
Because
Current.
he seems to be pretty good at rearing them, about like making new captains out of players somehow.
I'm trying to think. I think there's a world in which sometime in the future, Yapzor or Zai might be captains.
Like
I
I
don't.
thought about Zai. I think before he went back to studying. Like I really wanted to see him become a captain after he came back, because I think he's he has like this intuition, but I'm not sure if he's a good leader.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I don't think there's any rush for that to happen. It's this weird thing where like there's a real lack of good leaders in Dota, and so the ones that we do have, like teams are constantly going to be built around them. But I don't think any of those guys are retiring anytime soon. So I don't think there's like, at least in the Western scene, like a big need for. In fact, we even got Insania. Insania is kind of the breakout lead
Yeah,
of 2018, 2019.
I'm
Um,
totally rooting for him. Like, I think as far as captains go, I really like Puppy, and I like Insania now as well.
yeah, well, but you like Puppy because of your
Yeah,
silly patriotism, right?
yeah. I have to like him because there aren't too many of us from that small country. So,
You know, when I worked at Starladder in Minsk, Puppy bought me dinner.
oh,
Like literally just me. I'm serious. This is like, brush
okay.
with fame.
Why?
Like we're all sitting around. There were a bunch of talents sitting around the table, and Puppy came to join us, and we were chatting.
Mhm.
And then like people started leaving, and then he just like asked me if I wanted to have dinner with him. I was, I was,
Oh.
I was like, you don't say no to this guy. It's like, and then yeah, and then he bought me dinner, and we chatted about Ice Frog for like an hour,
Mm.
and then that was that. And like whenever I go to Dota events, short chat with him,
Oh,
it's like
that's nice.
um, yeah, that's the whole story. I mean, there's not. Um, I can also say about that event. I mean, I guess also because it was in Eastern Europe, there were fans lining up outside the player hotel
Oh no.
just to meet Puppy. They were like, we would get up in the morning and there'd be hundreds of people outside the hotel just waiting to get a glimpse of Puppy. Like
Oh
he is
dear.
super, super popular in that region.
I mean, he
So
is he's actually from a Russian-speaking family, I think. And obviously he was in Navi, so
yeah, he definitely speaks both
yeah,
Russian and Estonian.
yeah.
Um, you don't speak Russian, do you?
I speak some. I mean, I've not
Okay.
had practice in years, so I can
Yeah,
probably understand some stuff, but not not too much.
Yeah. Because like the Estonian, as in the language, like Estonian itself is a bit more like, what do you? It's a bit more like Finnish or something, right?
Yeah, it's not Slavic. So
Is
there's
it? I
hmm?
mean, like how similar is it to Finnish? Like could do you think Papi could speak to Topson? Yeah.
uh it's somewhat similar. There's I think there's a lot of differences in vocabulary, but you would recognize like the other language. Like
Okay.
you would probably understand a bunch of it because they have the same they're in the same like language group or family or whatever. I think they would actually just speak English.
Yeah, yeah, of course they would. I mean, that was just like a thought experiment.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe we should go on to one of the other topics. We've talked about cats and roster changes. Um, we have already done almost an hour, although there was some troubleshooting at the start. I think we probably don't need to talk about all of these topics.
Yeah, no, of course not. We can talk about whatever we want.
Yeah. I mean, I
Um,
want to make a like this line, this number 3 about opinions. I put that there, and I just there was just one thing I wanted to say, and that's because it comes up more and more, and sort of especially in the Twitter sphere.
mhm.
Um, and there's sort of two sides. There's sort of 2 points about opinions I want to make. The first one is that there's too often like I've been reprimanded quite a few times because of the way that I present. I'm like my background's in philosophy. I when I share opinions, I sort of state them as arguments, and therefore they sound like sort of more. It sounds like I'm trying to be authoritative. It sounds like I'm trying to say like this is the truth. And sometimes people get annoyed, and they go, why are you stating as a fact when it's just your opinion?" And the thing I want to say there's like anytime any person tweets something, they're obviously expressing their opinion, right? They're obviously
Yes.
like every tweet might as well start with "I think that" and then insert tweet. And so it's like for me, it's something it's like a pet hate of mine when someone chimes in and goes, "But that's just your opinion." Like no shit. Obviously, it's my fucking opinion. That everything. That's the whole Twitter as an enterprise. That's what it exists for: is people to express their opinions.
Yeah.
But then the flip side of this that annoys me just as much is when people kind of like try and reduce arguments to opinions, because a lot of the time they are kind of objective rights and wrongs or truths or facts in a situation, and people just kind of like there's this throwaway line of, "Oh, but that's just your opinion. My opinion is this." And that's like that's some kind of bullshit. Like, look, there's times where things are totally subjective, but I can guarantee you, as a person who's like thought about a lot and actually taught material on this stuff, like the belief that everything's relative leads us nowhere. If you really think that everything's relative, then we can't say anything about anything. Society can't make progress. We can't answer any questions. It's a fucking terrible view to have.
But
And
you
so I just like I really hate the way this word opinion is thrown around. It's like used so like almost every time someone brings up the word opinion, they're saying something stupid, and that drives me crazy.
I think you're just giving in to the trolls.
You're probably right. You're probably right. Ah,
You should sometimes consider before replying to some of them because yeah, some people just don't
yeah.
they just want attention. They don't care about the discussion.
I have actually, yeah. I've started recently. I've started muting people. I like made a decision a long time ago that I'm not going to block. I don't see the need to block anyone because like like I guess I would block someone if like my friends constantly were sharing their stuff and I didn't want to see it. But mostly I feel like people block people to stop, almost like spitefully. Like I'm blocking you so you can't see my things. And I don't see the need to stop someone seeing my tweets. Anyone who wants can see my tweets. And the mute function kind of like does the opposite direction well enough. If you mute someone, you'll never see anything they say. So I've definitely started muting people. Some of the like totally senseless trolls who come to my Twitter and just try and provoke me, they get mutes.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to find my block list right now. I think there's definitely someone on there, but where do I find it?
I don't know. I mean,
Uh,
I'm certainly blocked by quite a few people, quite a few significant people, in fact.
I was blocked by Crit for significant amount of time until he joined EG, and I guess their whatever PR manager unblocked me, or I don't know. But yeah, I try to not block people. I try to mute and tailor my timeline, but Twitter keeps wanting to make people reactionary. The
Yeah,
same that
yeah.
happened to YouTube, where you just go down the rabbit hole and you end up on the alt-right videos.
Yeah,
It's
I I've been blocked by No-Tail for about 2 years, and like that's people always surprised when I tell them that one because he said flower or whatever. But
but,
I mean,
but
I
yeah,
know
no,
why he
no,
blocked me.
he's not a flower. What?
I mean, look, he to be honest, I wrote an article about homophobia, which he was the entry point for because he had said something he said Ice plays tied into like a faggot, and like the article wasn't about him, but like it started with him, because that was kind of the entry point for writing that article. And I mean, I guess he took it personally. It was bad press for him, and then that was that. Um, it's usually when I write an article. Actually, I got blocked by PPD after. Um,
I think PPD has come around a bit, knowing that he's more like a personality now, and he needs to deal with some people instead of being a TI winner anymore.
yeah, that's true. I mean, he's not on top at the moment, and that's actually, you know what? That's a good place for us to kind of pivot this discussion to the Seb blog. Because it's like I was really impressed by some of the things he said in that blog. I mean, I used to be a big fan of Seb's blogs. I always read them, and he was blogging already 5-6 years ago. Um, and one of the first pieces of content I ever wrote in Dota was actually an interview because I was reading his blog, and as a result of reading his blog, thought this guy's a really interesting guy to talk to about Dota. Um, but what's cool is now he's written this blog after being a two-time world champion, and in there he says some critical things about the way things are. He says, for example, that it's quite toxic that we've got this sort of mentality of you're first or you're nothing, and people remember the winners but nobody else. And he doesn't get into the specifics, but I think it's sort of hinting at the ecosystem makes it that way, and part of that is prize distribution. Part of that is being very top heavy, not supporting the tier 2 scene, those kinds of things. And I just think it's really great for someone of his stature, for someone who's just been a two-time world champion, to talk about those things, because normally the people with the power and the influence are the ones who don't talk. You'll normally find that when there's issues in sort of the DPC or whatever, it's not the people currently at the top of the DPC who are pointing these issues out. It's the people who are struggling, and then there's always that people get to dismiss them, saying, "Oh, but you're only saying that because you're struggling." But you have to take the guy seriously when he's the guy who just won the champ. He just won the world championship twice in a row, and he's telling you this system is unfair. So I have enormous respect for him, and don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm not being an apologist for, like, there was some troubling stuff that he said earlier in the year about Russian people. He did apologize for that, and I was very happy to hear that. But and just from a Dota perspective, this is a person who's always really impressed me. He's always been very innovative in his thinking, always been very thoughtful, concerns himself with the mental aspect of the game, which I think is very mature. And he has a sense of right and wrong, which is quite rare, at least in terms of like being vocal about it in Dota.
I think the saddest part about this post was what he already said in the beginning, is that he can't talk too much about like how they won, and most of the other parts as well, that they can't really divulge into it. So I I feel like this was a bit of a tease, but I understand that this was like a thank you to the community, I guess. Uh, but otherwise, yeah, I, I, it's something that needs to come from the teams and the players that they say that they need um, a reinvigorated ecosystem, basically. Because
Yeah.
if the community says that, it might reach the right people, but if the the people who are actually on the top say it, it has a way bigger effect.
Yeah, and what's more than that is the community usually doesn't know what it thinks until the top people tell them what to think.
Yeah,
And so like so it's like as soon as the top players and personalities are saying stuff, the community suddenly says the same stuff. And so, those two big bodies that are able to actually pressure Valve to change things, they sort of work hand in hand. As soon as we got some top pro players talking about issues, the pressure's there overnight. Um, so that's great. I mean, so there's this sort of like hat tip to things being a little bit unfair the way. And there's also another part of his blog which sort of refers to the importance of the mental side of the game and hiring a psychologist and that kind of stuff. And I also think it's really cool that he used this platform to mention that, so that people will take it a bit more seriously. There's all these memes about, oh, Anna's going to take another 6 month break. You know what?
yeah.
Fuck, that's great. If that's, you know what? If Anna's the first person in Dota 2 to like show how successful it can be to take your own mental health seriously, then kudos to him for doing that. Like, I mean, I don't actually see why people think it's funny rather than appreciating that this person who's like been so ultra successful has repeatedly shown that what's valuable to them in their success is to take their health seriously and take it easy and not burn themselves out.
I I think it's it's meant to be like funny, but I think what it also shows that it is a possibility, and if you say it enough, it becomes reality, and we're not gonna have any more of these 10-hour days, 7 days a week kind of things. So I think it's actually somewhat of a good thing that people um, are talking about it, even if it's memes, because that's just the way that the community likes to discuss stuff. I
Yeah,
think the most bitter people are obviously going to say like you're not going to be anything if you don't play 24/7, if you don't eat, breathe, and sleep Dota. But I think in general people like realize that this is a necessity, and it is possible to compete at the top without putting your whole life and your health towards it.
yeah, I think that's a really good point. Just for the discussion in any way is a good thing. So I definitely agree with you.
I've only read the blog once while I was coming home from work. So is there
No, I
anything
mean,
else?
no. I think other than like to me, the valuable things were mostly indirectly commenting on the DPC, indirectly commenting on psychology. The rest of it is kind of just like he's just being a nice guy and saying thanks and talking about how it feels and that kind of stuff, which like I don't really think is a discussion point for us. Um,
Yeah, I mean the other the big thing that they did was they had the back-to-back wins, but I mean that's nothing
yeah.
too much to discuss about. We all know that.
Um, I'm just looking at the chat. There's a question from Strider asking if we know why Anna takes those breaks. The obvious assumption is mental health, but did he ever publicly talk about it? No, I don't think he has publicly talked about it, but I don't think mental health is even an assumption because if the for me the mere fact of taking a break suggests that like what it means to take a break is to not work for a while. What it means to not work for a while is to guard yourself against burnout. Like it for me that's like inherently a mental health thing. Even if Anna were to come out and to talk about taking breaks and not mention mental health, it would still be a mental health issue, in my opinion. It would it's still that's still what it's about. Um, and what's more than that, I can guarantee you that the vast majority of times the players do take these sort of vague breaks for vague personal reasons. that's what they're talking about. They're talking about mental health. Um, so yeah, I mean, you said could it have been due to education? Sure, I feel like if it was, then he probably would have just said that. But my sort of bottom line is that regardless, just the fact of taking breaks makes it a mental health issue, even if it's not dressed up as one.
All right. Uh, I guess that's that for the blog.
Yeah, what else
Well,
do we have on the agenda for today?
uh, new heroes. I don't know how much there is to talk about it. I, I like neither of us has played for a while, I think.
Yeah, and those heroes are not even available yet. I mean, we've like I guess we've watched the videos of them, right? The
Yeah.
what's it, the Void Spirits and the I don't know what's the other one called? It's Timbersaul's aunt. I don't know what it's called.
Snapfire.
Yeah, Snapfire. Okay. Um, I kind of would like to play a little bit of Dota again.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need to get a new
I,
computer
I,
first,
I
but
guess
like,
that's a good question. What would make you play Dota again? What's the one thing? If you have a PC, what's the one thing that would make you play again?
um, I mean they've already got it. To be honest, the changes that they made to ranked recently, where everyone's queuing for their roles, um, like that's something that I would strongly prefer. And it's if it wasn't for the fact that I couldn't play Dota just because of my PC issues, like I probably would have come back for a bit. Because I sort of always wanted to be able to play Dota that way. I always felt like pubs are far too different to competitive games, and that role queuing makes it feel a bit more structured in that sense. Um,
I think I've not heard too much about the roles yet, but apparently there is possibility for abuse, basically, and some people say that it forces them into certain roles, but I don't think that's ever been true or that will ever be true.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's always going to be abuse, and the truth is that the most recently, the last couple of years when I've played Dota, a lot of the times it's actually made me kind of anxious. So I'm not like at pains to find a way to do it. Like at such time that I get a computer, then I'll play again. It's always fun to try new heroes. It'll be fun to have a playing group again. Um,
Yeah, I actually for years, I've every now and then when I played more, I would try solo ranked, and it's unbearable. Like Dota for me always has been team game, like since the very beginning. So playing solo has never been a thing for me, and I think nowadays there's less and less people who actually play it because I stopped playing around the time when I started playing PUBG more, but now I also don't play that anymore.
yeah, I mean that's part of it. Also, if you have something else that replaces it even temporarily, I play a lot of Magic now. Um, Funnily enough, there was a tweet today which I retweeted, but like probably most of my followers wouldn't understand. But there's a guy called John Finkel who tweeted at Day 9 in Purge and asked if he could play with him. And John Finkel's actually the greatest Magic player of all time. He's like, well, there's two guys. There's him and this other German guy, Kai Bu, who are like very definitely the best two players ever. So for a person who's interested in both games, that was super exciting that like the best Magic player like expressed interest in getting into Dota and joining Day 9 and Purge and their videos and stuff. I kind of hope that happens. To me, these like I feel like what attracts me about these two games, what they have in common is they're both so strategically deep, and so I'm always sort of interested to see like great minds from the two overlap, see what they can lend to each other because there's real strategic depth, and that's just one of the things I'm most interested in general.
I think I
Um,
would maybe even play Arena, but I do not like the collection aspect at all.
so you mean you'd want to just what do you mean you'd want to just have all the cards right away or
Yes.
okay? Um,
I,
well,
I
that's
don't I don't care for any sort of collection. Like even in Dota, I don't like care for collecting skins and stuff. Collecting isn't my
yeah.
thing.
No, that's fair. I mean, I don't have a real answer to that. Like for me, like I haven't spent money on Arena really. I've spent probably $10 in total, and I've played the game intensely for over a year. Um, but that's also because I'm pretty good at the game. It would cost more if you're not. We've got a discussion going on in the comments right now about looks like it's about Thompson if he's taking a break or not. I mean, I think a lot of people are taking breaks.
Yeah,
A lot of people are gonna miss the first major. We saw LGD also missing the first major.
yeah. I think
They also said they're replacing their
there's
coach.
there's like someone said there's like five, maybe six teams who will miss the first major, which is which was another uh quite big topic, I think. I can't remember who started it, but well, what do you think about that? Like the biggest teams missing the first biggest tournament after TI.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there should be an off season, and until there's like a structured, scheduled, clear off season, this is kind of how the Dota ecosystem has always developed. People start taking things into their own hands. Probably we'll see a year or two from now, Valve will actually just say, there's a few months after TI that Dota doesn't happen. Accommodate for that. Um, so right now we've kind of got what is it? Right now there is a break. There's sort of informal week break usually after TI.
Yep.
Before things get started again, which I think is maybe a little too short, and also it's informal. It's not like specified. Um,
I
I
for
I
me the biggest issue is the amateur scene or the semi-pro scene because they will have a break from the end of the qualifiers until basically when the first minor qualifiers start up again, which is
right.
more than 3, maybe 4 months.
Right. But I mean, independently of this, I think we already agreed like, the amateur scene needs to have more kind of leagues happening, more
Yeah.
active possibility to play. What's really good for the amateur scene, though, and this is what, there are people complaining about, what if all the tier one teams skip the first major? To me, that's fucking great. Firstly, they're taking their mental health seriously. They're, good. But then also, the up and coming teams, the tier two teams, the tier three teams, they got chances to get to majors that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So
Yeah.
for me, it's like a win-win situation. Everyone is benefiting. If a bunch of teams skip the first major, nobody loses out for that. Like, I guess the person you could say loses out is viewers, but it's like really picky viewers. Because for me as a
Yes.
viewer, I'd be kind of excited to see different teams for a change, even if it's just for one round of events.
I
Um,
think the problem that was brought up is that a team that maybe doesn't deserve a TI invite could get a TI invite by just winning that major and then doing not much else during the season or not even
but
developing themselves.
people got these. It's funny. The people who talk about deserving or not, yeah, I wish they would like have been around 5 years ago when
Yeah.
when like it was literally just like four random Valve people sitting in an office sucking out of their thumbs who goes to TI. Like I really don't think you can complain that much at the point where we have a system
Yeah.
and then what the system outputs is like that's who goes to TI.
But
Um,
do you think there should be like a point decay during the season?
um, mm, I don't know if we need a decay. I'm trying to think like if we look at the last TI, like if we look at TI 9, were there any teams that we felt like got there and based on the results of TI, it seemed like they yeah.
I think there
Like
was like one or two teams that were a bit sketchy and like I think there was a few teams in the qualifiers who could have been
I mean
better.
the weakest team at TI to me was Chaos by very far, and like they won a
Yes.
qualifier, so there's not much you can say about that. Um, I guess the one team that qualified on DPC points that looked out of their depth was Keen, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so maybe there's an argument there, and I still wish that it had been eHome. If eHome hadn't made all those freaking roster changes, they would have had enough points and qualified themselves. Um,
Do you think
but
the
that's
qualifier slots are distributed well? Do you think one per region is enough for some of the regions. Maybe some of the
Um,
regions should have like 2 slots.
I think it's fine for now. I think that the sort of the on the season time distributes sort of balances out that stuff quite significantly. You know, we still ended up having the strongest region be the most represented region at TI, right? And people talked about how it was bad for EU because there's so many strong EU teams, and so if you're like, you know, you might be good enough, but there's just that many teams better than you. But actually, then the team that won the EU qualifier were by far the worst team in TI, right? So it feels like we ended up getting exactly the right number of EU teams.
But maybe
Um,
it was a fluke.
I mean, maybe. But the truth is, we just need to iterate on this more. Like we need, like that's not a problem that I would feel needs urgent fixing. The problem that we discussed last week, the one that needs urgent fixing is putting money into the tier two scene, and that involves, you know, I think that involves making qualifiers, you know, combine the qualifiers for the majors and the minors, make them into league structures instead of one-off tournaments, make them last longer, have like a smaller league division that feeds into that league, um,
Yeah.
and give people prize money for finishing well in the qualifiers, not just for being at lands.
I
Um,
mean, even at lands, teams barely win anything.
yeah, it lands, it should go deeper as well. Like all of these kind, like a lot of it comes down to just spending more money. And I know there's a debate about this, and I saw Rainessa wrote an article for Rivalry where she was talking about how money's not a fix-all and they should do other things. But I got to say, my honest opinion is like, imagine there's 10 options, and one of them is to do nothing and leave things how they are, and another one is Valve randomly throws lots of money at the wall. And then the other eight of Valve spends their money in careful ways to do certain things. To me, the second option is way better than the first option, and it's only slightly different to the other ones. You know, like so basically my point is that what's more important is that they spend more money. That's way more important than how they spend it. Like once they start spending more money, we can talk about how they spend it. But the main issue is that they're not spending money on preserving the ecosystem in the first place. And I think it's just too ambitious to imagine that they'll spend it exactly optimally right away. Let's first focus on getting them to just agree to spend the money.
Yes, I agree.
But I was thinking we maybe for next week we should talk about the Chinese scene, 'cause it's sort of a interesting topic that's been coming back over and over again. Like, is the Chinese scene in decline? There was that superstitious belief they were supposed to win TI, they didn't. Now they didn't again. But at the same time, you've got this LGD team that are just constantly there. Um, you know, there's ways in which it seems like they've fallen behind. There's other ways in which they still feel quite dominant. And I wanted to bring it up now, but I think we should rather wrap up and just sort
Yes,
of bracket that for next week.
it's been more than an hour now. I mean, I don't mind at all it going even longer, but
No,
maybe.
but you know what? I think for the people who listen to the recording afterwards on YouTube, it's a bit better if it's like it's intimidating if it's too long, you know?
Yeah, I guess I really don't I don't have any numbers on that. Let's just say that because actually um I mean uh I don't really want to talk about him and I don't want to bring him as an example, but Thorin makes like super long videos and they actually perform really well. So I think it's more about just having the audience and having the following than
Yeah,
the length.
sure, it's possible. It's definitely possible. My concern is like, you know, we obviously not there yet. And I say yes, that's very ambitious. We're not there. Um, and like I don't want someone to open the video and be like, holy shit, this is like super long and just give up before even trying. Because obviously once they start listening to us talking, they're gonna be hooked. They'll listen for
Yeah.
3 hours.
Yeah.
But like we gotta avoid the possibility that people who don't even start listening. Um,
Yeah. I
but
mean,
that's I don't know. Anyone who does listen to till the end, it would be really cool if you actually left some comments on YouTube just saying what you did like, what you didn't like, what you think we could do better. Because we're gonna keep doing this.
yeah. I obviously like feedback because it's really difficult to improve without it. Like I have some data, but it's like a guessing game.
Cool. So, any kind of sign offs we need to do? Any
Um,
shout outs?
Shout outs. I don't know. Who do I shout out?
Shout out
Uh,
to protesters in Hong Kong.
I don't want to get into that topic. This is me.
Okay, I will give a shout out to the protest.
Yeah, I don't want to take sides right now. I mean, I know what my side is, but I'm trying to stay neutral, even though I shouldn't, probably.
Yeah, that's okay.